Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 8 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading The Power of Myth, a conversation between the mythologist Joseph Campbell and the journalist Bill Moyers about the importance of mythology today. This time we're covering the 7th chapter, The Tales of Love and Marriage, in which Joseph Campbell gets into his thoughts on proper relationships and things like that. It's a very interesting chapter. I really enjoyed reading this. Fascinating thoughts in here.
Yes, I agree.
You're a little downcast today.
I'm not downcast.
You're not downcast.
I was downcast earlier today. I'll tell you. I'm just going to have to go on this little rant to get it out of my system. And then we're going to talk about the topic. We're recording this on August 8th, 2022, which is, I think, it's going to be a date that we're going to remember in the future as where we crossed the line between a constitutional republic and this banana republic bullshit that we have going on right now.
Why is that?
They raided former President Trump's home and searched his papers for what is purportedly, of course, the New York Times has a story. So the New York Times evidently can talk to FBI agents about classified, confidential investigations, and no one goes to jail for that. This is probably a grand jury investigation, which is secret, which means anybody who leaks the contents of a grand jury investigation should go to jail.
Interesting.
But the day of the raid, somehow the New York Times has two sources, of course, anonymous, unnamed sources, that for the reason for the raid, which is that President Trump purportedly took some records in the National Archives Act, says that he shouldn't have it. He should have kept it in the White House. Well, I got news for everybody out there in the world. The President of the United States determines what is classified and what is not classified. And I think that could be done by either his official act or his official word. Meaning if a president stuffs a confidential document down his pants, it is now his document that he can carry anywhere. Now, maybe he should have retained a copy, but everything's electronic anyway.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that all these documents are not in some electronic format still with the government. But he may have a paper copy or some other electronic copy, and somehow that's a crime for the President of the United States to have a copy of his own documents, which by his own act would have made it not confidential and top secret just by the mere fact that he took it out of there. And I'm telling you, I think they're going to keep pushing it. They're going to arrest Donald Trump, and all hell is going to break loose. And I'm not looking forward to that. I don't think they have any idea what's going to happen when that happens. There's already, right out now as we're recording this, stupid hillbillies and Hoosiers going to Mar-a-Lago to do a human wall around his... He's not even there, I don't think. He's probably in New York or some other place. But can you imagine what his supporters would do if they put him in cuffs? I mean, I don't think it's gonna be possible.
So why do you think this day particularly is a day that would be remembered? Why is this crossing the line?
This is the first step where if it doesn't... See, and the other thing is, they could release... So they have to leave a copy of the search warrant behind. When you do an executed search warrant, you have to leave a copy of the search warrant. There's a service copy and there's a court copy, and then there's this is federal, so I haven't done a federal search warrant. But you generally have a copy for law enforcement, a copy for the courts that you return with whatever you seize. There's a list, inventory of what you've taken. And then there's a service copy, which is the same list and the search warrant and the affidavit as the basis of it you leave behind. Now, their investigation may be sealed because it's confidential. Of course, they can leak everything to the New York Times, but heaven forbid they tell the American people about it.
Yes.
And if they have him dead to rights on a federal crime, they should have announced it.
Yes.
They have to have have to have evidence of the crime first. Now you could say, well, you only need probable cause for a search warrant, which is true.
Yeah.
But even for just Joe Blow, you don't do search warrants unless you're already pretty convinced with actual admissible evidence that that person has already committed a crime and you can prove it.
Yeah.
You're just looking for the further documentation of it. And if you're going to do that with a public official, even if it's a local public official, you want to make sure that you're not overstepping the bounds and just trying to investigate a person as opposed to investigate a crime. And they're investigating a person. And then you look at the context. So the answer to that is the raid on his house has never been done before, never been contemplated before for any president, no matter how corrupt they've been.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had corrupt presidents. They used to have patronage systems. Well, like President Garfield, I think, was shot by kind of a half lunatic guy that didn't get a patronage job. He got shot in the back and he died in office. I mean, and they used to have when the new president comes in, all the old people got fired. Everybody in the federal government. It was just completely corrupt. And then they had reforms, and now it's just all Democrats. So that now it's corrupt in a different way. But the next step, now we're all on notice. And by we, I mean anybody who's a Republican or a conservative, they're coming after us. And they're going to come after Trump. And they've made a big mistake in doing this before they arrest him. Because now I fear what you're going to end up in a situation where Trump's going to get back to Florida. And he's going to make sure that there's local law enforcement 24/7 around him. And the feds are going to have to break a line of local law enforcement. And local law enforcement is going to be very tempted to arrest the federal law enforcement officers for overstepping their authority, which you can't. Just because you're a federal employee doesn't mean that you can violate state laws.
Yeah.
And the feds don't think that's true. But it's true. And like in Missouri, we passed a law and a bunch of liberals were crazy about it. There's a criminal, they passed a specific criminal statute that criminalizes local law enforcement cooperation with federal violations of people's Second Amendment rights and the Second Amendment rights as they apply from the Missouri Constitution as well. So that basically it's threatening to arrest the feds if they come after our guns, and makes it very clear the local law enforcement is to arrest the feds if they come for our guns.
Interesting.
And I think it's really the first step, because now people are going to be prepared, because I didn't really believe they'd do it. I didn't, I know they're crazy.
Yeah.
But for them to do this, that means they're trying to set up the documentation so they can arrest him. And the reason why you arrest him, they don't care about the law.
Yeah. I mean, it's strange, the point you made earlier, that they haven't had a public official announce it at all.
Correct.
Because wasn't that their whole point with the January 6th committee? Oh, we're being very transparent. We're showing the American people what happened. At least that's what they were saying.
Yeah, it's all a bunch of
and
lies,
you would think they would apply that here as well, but evidently not, because that whole January 6th committee was dedicated to finding his crimes and all of that sort of thing. I don't know if this is in any way related to that. Probably not. But you would think that they would apply, at least nominally, the same approach to that.
If they were smart and they really wanted to protect the Constitution and to only go after somebody who is guilty and they can get a conviction for a crime, that's exactly what they do. Yeah, they'd lay it out and they'd hold a lengthy press conference, issue a report that is detailed, and give everybody an opportunity to see it. If President Trump is guilty of serious felony offenses, I don't want to have anybody like that near the levers of power. But if you can't lay it out, then what the hell are you guys doing? Yeah. And then on the other hand, you look at Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, she destroyed thousands of emails, thousands of them. And then she just joked about it. They say, "Hey, why did you wipe your servers?" And she says, "Oh, you mean like with a cloth, like wipe it with a cloth?" That's what her response was, because she's a Democrat and she knows she's immune from the law. And we have a two-tier justice system. African American activists have said for decades there's a two-tiered system, one for white, one for blacks. I'm starting to think that I have to rethink my entire view of the American criminal justice system, because if I'm wrong about this, and I'm thinking this about political parties, maybe I'm wrong about the two-tiered thing with the whites and blacks. I mean, it's outrageous, and it's dangerous, and we're heading down a dark path, and I don't know where it's going to end up, but I'm going to be in the mix. I'll just put it that way.
Is that a threat?
No, it's just we can't. I can't sit idly by. I'm not saying violence or anything like that, but I'll guarantee if there's if the January 6th was not an insurrection, no one brought a gun to use there. There was no plan to take over the government. There's maybe a type of plan to disrupt the government, which they did for like 3 hours or something. Yeah. But with this, I don't think they have any concept of what a real insurrection would be, and that if just 1% of Donald Trump's supporters showed up with half of their guns, they would take over the government. It would be a war. It'd be a civil war. And that 1%, motivated 1%, fully armed, because I know some of these people, and they have arsenals. It is a literal shooting war, and they could if they had an insurrection, truly planned an insurrection on January 6th, they could have easily murdered every Capitol Police officer and every elected official without any difficulty. Now, the counterattacks would have been tough to fight off. But it could have happened. So when they talk about insurrection, we all out here know that was no insurrection. If we wanted to do an insurrection, you'd all be dead.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about. But I got to tell you, if they arrest him, there will be shots fired. And I'm not going to shoot him. I'm not talking about me. But there will be a civil war. And it's so stupid. Over that guy. Why do they care so much? Yeah. DeSantis is rising in the polls. If they just leave Trump alone, DeSantis would probably beat him. Yeah. But of course, they fear DeSantis too because he's like Trump but more effective. Because he doesn't hire lunatics like Scaramucci and Omarosa.
That was a fantastic rant. We are 11 minutes into this episode, and we have not even touched on the subject material. You were saying beforehand you wanted to find a way to work that in.
I didn't even work it in. I just bludgeoned it in.
You gave up. You just out the gates with that. We'll see if you can connect anything in the podcast episode back to that.
It's just a rant.
It was a rant.
People can just, skip over it.
People can skip over it, of course.
Whatever.
So we start off in this chapter talking about love and marriage with the troubadours.
By the way, it is a great chapter.
Yes.
I appreciated it. Yeah, it seemed more of a discussion of love and marriage generally. I know he references mythology and that kind of stuff, but didn't you think it was more of a discussion of love and marriage?
Yes.
Generally, and then
it was more historical, I would say, not so much even mythology. I think it's
I think he was really just had a lot of thoughts about what love is.
Yeah,
and then he kind of cited sometime here and there about mythology or historical figures, especially with regard to the Catholic Church. So that was very interesting.
It was very interesting. But he starts off talking about the troubadours. And the troubadours were the nobility of Provence, France, and much of Greater Europe in the 12th century.
They were like a cappella group from New Jersey. Were they the troubadours? Go ahead.
That's
1950s? I bet you there was a troubadours.
I'm sure there was. Okay. That sounds about right. And what Campbell really says is that they were responsible for the transformation of love because they were the first to think of love as a person-to-person relationship. And then from there he goes in and talks about there are three types of love. The first two were the ones that came before the troubadours and kind of the most understood beforehand. Those were eros, which were the biological urge, and in that sort of love, the personal factor doesn't matter. It's just that biological compulsion. Then there was agape, which is the idea of love thy neighbor as thyself, the spiritual love, and it doesn't really matter who the neighbor is. It's that idea of compassion. But this new type of love in the 12th century was amor, which is the highest spiritual experience, purely personal idea, and it was introduced by the troubadours. That's their big achievement to say.
Have you ever thought about these concepts in that manner?
I've heard them discussed in such a way.
I've never heard of it as three. I've always seen it as, like the physical urge, as opposed to a deeper love. But I haven't seen it split out three ways. And the spiritual love is pretty interesting, where it's like love of your neighbor, love of people generally, and then the personal love. So
I've heard it talked about with even more because in terms of the Greeks, because the Greeks had, I believe it was 7 different words that we just translate as love. So there are 7 different types
like
of affection and that sort of thing. And I think most of those can be kind of condensed down into what he separates as the 3 here. So I have kind of heard this before, but it's interesting the way he describes it here in these three terms. And he kind of goes on to say that amor was counter to what the medieval church taught in support of arranged marriage, and that it emphasized the individual. And so Moyers kind of asks, why is this important? Campbell responds, it was important in that it gave the West this accent on the individual, that one should have faith in his experience and not simply mouth terms handed down to him by others. It stresses the validity of the individual's experience of what humanity is, what life is, what values are, against the monolithic system. The monolithic system is a machine system. Every machine works like every other machine that's come out of the same shop. So that's really what he says, what separates amor from these other types of love, because all the other types of love, you would kind of see the same thing, no matter who you were. But when you get to Amor, that individual love, that is unique for those two people experiencing that love. You will not see that type of love in that same way between two other people. And I know you're big on free will, so I figured you would like a lot of what he says here about the individual and that sort of thing here.
Well, yeah, I think it's the way he describes it as almost foundational of Western philosophy. I've not heard that before. Maybe if I had not paid attention to it. But it's I think it's compelling that this view of love and individual love and marriage, and that you choose the person that you would marry as opposed to arranged marriages as more foundational than I ever considered.
I mean, it kind of makes sense because that is the fundamental relationship for everything that then comes out of that, essentially, because that's what you would pass down to your children as well. Right. And if you're passing it down in this one sense in marriage, why would we not also look for the individual in every other aspect of our lives? This most important aspect of our lives in marriage, we should apply that everywhere else.
Right. Well, that's true too. And I was thinking of along the lines, the many political thinkers have talked about, the family is the building block of Western society, family, then, beyond that, like the general community, and then the state above them, out in concentric circles, I guess. But this being even more fundamental or more foundational, being the actual relationship love, as opposed to, okay, here's the marriage, because marriage could be of any type, and to talk about how that is so important to Western philosophy. And
it makes it even better of a building block, because if you get to choose the other half of that building block, then it makes that whole block much stronger.
You'd hope so. Yeah.
You would hope so, yes.
Nowadays, I don't know.
Yeah, which we get into that a little bit later with some of the thoughts here.
I'll hold my thoughts on that one. Yep.
Campbell then goes to talk about libido over credo. These two words, credo means I believe. He says this is kind of the church's view before this point, knowing that the laws are passed down by God, and that disobeying these laws is a sin. That credo is a condemnation of the will to live, is how he describes it, which is interesting. Then he says the libido is the impulse to life, and it comes from the heart. And this is where we get romantic love from. It's an interesting distinction here. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with him in saying that, that the credo is going against the will to live, and the libido is the only way to kind of overcome that. I think there is some truth there, especially when we look at this time period and, what is more important, the church or the individual here. I think he's dead on there, but I don't know if it's exactly condemning the will to live if you say that you believe in these laws of God and disobeying them is a sin.
Yeah, I mean, I think he overstates it a little bit. That the credo is credo or credo.
Credo. I say credo. You can say credo.
You say potato, potato.
I say credo.
You say potato, I say potato.
Yes.
That's a great skit on Saturday Night Live. Google it. But credo, I think, his initial explanation were that there are certain rules of society, and back then it was arranged marriage, and so I don't know why he thinks that's against life, or I guess the way it depends on what you're talking about, life, like a free ability to live your life the way you want to. Maybe that's what he's really talking about, I guess. But
that makes sense.
Yeah. But there is a difference between that and just doing whatever you want to do, or doing what you think is best. He's certainly a romantic. He must have met some gal and connected eyes with her, because he keeps using that reference. Well, you look at her eyes. And
I think his wife, I think he only had one wife throughout his entire life. I think she was a dancer. And so I think he met her while she was dancing. So maybe, that is true. Yeah. He goes on to say that
my wife is also a dancer.
That is true. I'm aware. That is my mother.
I was dancing tonight.
You were.
And then I got home. I was told that the bad news about how our republic is veering off into despotism. Hence the first rant. Before that, I was fine.
Before that, you were fine, yeah. He goes on to say that marriage must be arranged by the heart, not society. He goes on and kind of expands on that. He says, love is bigger than death, pain, or anything. Love is the affirmation of the pain of life. So kind of going back to what we talked about a few episodes ago, and it was affirmation of pain. And he kind of says that is what love is. In order to love, there has to be pain. You have to kind of look at the face of death and move past that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, when you're up there on the altar, you have to look in the face of death.
I don't think that's what you're supposed to say.
Just move forward through it.
I don't know about that one.
Oh, that's not what he's saying. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh man.
Yeah. What do they say? Is like, what's that one country song? Find yourself in hell, keep moving before they notice you're there, or something. I forget how that. It's a good song.
I don't know what song you're talking about.
Well, I'll sing it for you next episode.
Oh, that would be just fantastic.
In your description of this podcast, maybe you should let people know to skip the first 11 minutes.
Yes, I was actually thinking about that.
All
I was thinking I would put something here at the beginning. Skip the first 11 minutes if you don't want to. If
you skip the first 11 minutes, go back and listen to it. It's important. So that's my message within the message.
So, yes, that's lovely. He then goes on to talk about individualism a lot more. Moyer says here that you have said that the point of all these pioneers in love is that they decided to be the author and means of their own self-fulfillment, that the realization of love is to be nature's noblest work, and that they were going to take their wisdom from their own experience, not from dogma, politics, or any current concepts of social good. And is this the beginning of the romantic idea of the Western individual taking matters into his or her own hands? And of course, to this, Campbell responds, yes.
Where are you at? What page are you on?
I'm on page 238, towards the bottom.
Oh, you're past me.
But yeah, I really liked what he says here, in this sort of definition of individualism, sort of in the scope of love, being the author and means of your own self-fulfillment. Love is nature's noblest work, and you're going to take that from your own experience and not from what people have taught you. Mm-hmm. I just really like his language there and sort of breaking down what, individual love really means. Yeah. I think it's a neat part there.
Well said. What do you think is, he talks about hell in the context of love and denial of yourself and that kind of stuff. But he has on here, the previous page, Campbell says, the punishment in hell is that you have for eternity that which you thought you wanted on earth. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's truth to that?
Well, that's what Dante really said. Yeah. Have you ever read the Inferno?
No, I just started to. I just couldn't do it.
I haven't read it yet, but I've read a lot about it, and that's sort of the general.
It seems like there's people so impressed with Dante's Inferno. I started to read it, and I'm like, eh.
I mean, it's a classic.
But it's been a long time. Yeah, just because it's a classic doesn't mean it's good.
I guess that's true. But I've heard it's very good. Mm-hmm. But that's essentially what he's drawing from there.
So good that nobody's actually read it. I bet you don't know anybody who's read it.
I do actually.
Who's read it?
I was talking to one of my friends 2 days ago who has read it.
Name
you
the
would
person.
You would be surprised. I won't name him on the podcast, but you would be very surprised at who it is.
Can you pause the audio?
I will
or mute it. Can you mute it?
I'll tell you after the episode. I don't want to lose our flow here.
Right. Yeah, we're really flowing.
We're really
strong.
flowing. Yeah, we're flowing strong. But yeah,
there's a lot of talk about hell in this, which you wouldn't expect in Tales of Love and Marriage.
You were going to ask me my opinion on something.
Yeah,
on that.
Yes. But yeah, do you think that hell, as he is referencing Dante in that, that hell is that you have for eternity that which you wanted on earth?
I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Why? Why is that?
Because the reason
seems counterintuitive to me.
Well, the reason that you would go to hell is for your sins, and presumably, if you were sinning, you were wanting something that was wrong. So if you are, I forget what exact examples that Dante uses, but he works them into neat punishments essentially, like the people. God, I can't remember now. Kind of
like the curses, like when you get when you make a deal with the devil and you say, "I want to be the most powerful man on earth," and you say that he makes you Hitler in 1945, in a bunker.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm the most powerful. Wait a second, that's not what I wanted.
Well, it's like who's the dude in Greek mythology who was always reaching for the plate of food in the afterlife, but he could never eat it. That guy, I can't think of his name.
He'd be like a glutton.
He'd be like a glutton.
He doesn't have it though.
But you are constantly wanting it.
But what his statement was that you have for eternity that which you thought you wanted on earth.
Yeah, I wish I could think of
the food.
I wish I could think of a specific example from Dante.
It'd be like there was an old was it a Looney Tunes episode where there was like a dream sequence with this little fat pig.
Yeah,
and there was no, it wasn't Porky Pig. It was like a different. It was predate that. But he had a bad dream, and for some reason, like, there's a mechanism that was shoving pies in his face, and he couldn't stop it.
Yeah,
because he's a little glutton.
Yeah,
similar to that. So
things like that. I think
it'd be the punishment of.
I think that comes directly from Dante. Actually, Dante wrote about the pig.
I wonder if I'll have to look that up. See if that animation was inspired. Those guys were had a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
a lot more education back then when you were
That is
writing
true.
cartoons. But anywho.
Yes. Anyway, back
So,
to individualism,
Yes.
what we're talking about here. Campbell says that this is the best part of the Western tradition, this recognition of and respect for the individual as a living entity.
Yep.
Not
Yep.
just in the context of everything else, but just you yourself are an entity.
And that's where I think he misses out when he glorifies this. We're all one.
Mm-hmm.
We're all one being. We're all part of this thing. But I mean, I know he values individuality,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to have a philosophy that believes that we're all part of the same thing,
Yeah.
while stressing appropriately the amount of individual value everybody has.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
they're
we talked
almost
about that before. It's like,
contradictory.
a very, very different philosophies that he combines. He then goes on to say that the head and the heart must be in cooperation. He says that the heart should be in the lead most of the time, but the head must be present and the heart must listen to the head from time to time. So, of course, love and really like reason and that sort of things, what should really be the guiding force. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that love should be the foremost guiding force in your life?
It depends on how you look at it. I'd say that should be your motivation. But you have to be so, like you even kind of mentioned, you have to be so careful that you don't set aside your intellect and your reason,
Yeah.
because that's where your love gets misapplied, I guess. or you
This
get
kind of goes
confused.
back to what we were talking
But
about.
he mentions the same type of thing.
It goes back to what we were talking about in his opinions on like following your bliss. I feel like this is really connecting to that here.
Correct.
Where if you just follow your bliss too blindly,
Correct.
then you're going to go down the wrong path. And I think that is what he's saying. You do
Yeah.
have to listen to the mind to make sure that you are following that bliss or following that love,
Yeah.
but doing it in the right fashion.
Well, he also has kind of a neat little brief discussion about chivalry. Around the same era back then, where they were coming up with temperance and courage.
Yeah, that's
and
what I'm gonna-
loyalty and he mentions, where was it at? Have we gotten to that point where he mentions?
I'm about
the
to
most
mention it right here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because he says it's really compassion. Because he says that, in order to win over the lady, the knights at this time, and all the time of chivalry, you used to need to have a gentle heart to win over the lady. And really, the gentle heart was measured by one's compassion. That was essentially the chief virtue in a way. Of course, you had all these other virtues surrounding the Arthurian knights and the Christian knights at this time. And Moyers kind of talks about that, and he seems to not really know what his thoughts are on that, because he says at the same time, that test is still present in current times. And he says, well, that test, applied to the 12th century just as much as it did in 1950 in Texas. But then he goes on to say, he feels like that test has been shattered today. Do we really have that test for relationships in which you need to kind of prove your compassion, I guess?
Well, I think that there's just such a devaluation of love. It's just become it's like the monetary supply in Biden's America. There's just too much of it around. It's too easy to have money, and then everything becomes too expensive. And the same concept applies to free sex and free relationships, where there's no limits on it. It's like it ends up, true love is so rare. It seems like. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting cynical in my old age.
Maybe.
But I think, yeah, I don't know.
Do you think compassion is the measure, is the best measure for if someone is a good husband or wife? Because I think that's what he's kind of saying here.
He is, and he's talking about in that context of a masculine world. Or in order to be compassionate, you have to be. There's a premise that you're already strong. You have to have physical and mental strength in order to be compassionate, because you have to be in a position to have that compassion for another, and you have to be able to follow through on it. And so I think the way he defines it, absolutely, it's important. I don't know. I mean, my number one key on the long term is loyalty.
Yeah.
And I used to have a slightly different view of that, but I mentioned that in a previous podcast. I mean, the successful marriage is built. The foundation is boring, but it's loyalty.
Well, I think that would also kind of go under compassion, because that's how he continuously describes compassion, as the suffering with.
Correct.
And I think that's really where
correct.
he would agree with you. To have compassion, you have to suffer with your husband or your wife, and that sort of thing there. So I think, I think that is under his definition of compassion as well. So I agree with him completely here. I think compassion is definitely the chief virtue, I guess, in choosing a partner in that way.
Yeah, and well, I guess we'll get to it later, but he also talks about how it's pain.
Yeah.
Love is just eating the pain and consuming it and dealing with it and welcoming it. And I think there's a certain amount of truth to that. You just have to be able to suffer together, and you have to be able to get through those, because there's always going to be ups and downs. Yeah. If you can't, you have to have the loyalty to get through the downs, and you have to have the loyalty to be able to understand that the ups are for both of you. But
absolutely,
that's a big part of it. He's right about all that stuff. Compassion. I mean, I think he's a little bit old fashioned, because almost now we're almost too compassionate. There has to be a certain amount of, is it rectitude? There has to be a certain amount of.
Well, I mean, I guess it goes back to, true compassion is suffering with. It's not just that we just blindly give things to people because we are compassionate. We have to suffer with them. They have to suffer with us, and that sort of thing. So I do agree. He is a little old-fashioned here, at least in his definition.
Yeah.
But
I think, I think that it's not. He's talking about an old system that's no longer in existence, where the men are competing for the affections of women, and the women are kind of sitting back and having these men do these dances, not literally, but making an impression upon a woman, and so you have to show off how strong and compassionate you are, and that you're a good person. If anything, it seems like it's reversed. It seems to me, of course, I'm not really in tune with the Utes, but it seems to me it's the opposite now. It's almost like the guys are more reticent, and the girls have to show they have some value to the guys, because the girls are prancing around. Look at me, why don't you go out with me and stuff? But I don't know. Yeah,
I don't know. It's
a weird society.
It's a very weird system, because my mind just immediately goes to Tinder. And it's just like...
I don't even know. I mean, I know of it, but isn't that where you have to, you just look at a picture and you swipe? Do you have that?
No, I do not.
Okay,
I do not. Right. I know some people who do. But it's, you look at the picture and they have a little bio or whatever. They have a few pictures on there. And it's just like... It's just bizarre to me that would be potentially how you would meet someone that you think you might love. I don't know. It's just... It's strange, because, I mean, of course, swiping right or left doesn't really mean anything. It just puts you, if you both swipe right?
I don't know.
Then it just, opens up a text message between the two of you, essentially. And it's just I don't know. It's just so strange. There's no competition there, but at the same time there is. It's you're not proving anything, but at the same time you're competing. You're competing with everybody else who flashes in front of the person's screen, but you're not actually proving anything.
Yeah. What's a country song? Looking for love in all the wrong places. Yeah. Looking for love. That's what it reminds me of. And I've been involved in some litigation, civil stuff and family stuff. And you wonder, how are these two dysfunctional people ever meet? It's always on the internet, always in some app or something. I was going to say something else that I thought was brilliant. I got sidetracked.
Was it about Tinder?
Gosh darn it. I forget what it was.
It's a shame.
It is gone, lost.
Lost to time. Moving on from that,
there.
Kind of in the midst of talking about the knights and sort of competing for the woman, he brings up the Holy Grail.
He loves Holy Grail stories.
He does love the Holy Grail.
Which are a good story. I really enjoyed reading those back in the day.
I've read them.
Percival,
yes.
Isn't he
is one of the knights. Yes. He says that nature and spirit yearn to meet one another, and that the grail that the knights search for is symbolic of an authentic individual life that unites what has been divided. So the grail in this, the quest that he's sort of saying here, demonstrates the union of nature and spirit. He says that the beginning of individual Europe, or Grail Europe, is the idea that one must earn a wife, not be given one. And I really like that last point.
Agreed.
And that, the quest is to have two things become one, not to be, just given these things, or to have these things arranged for you, but they must go out and earn them. Earn that quest to unite nature and spirit, to be with the one that you love, which is a very neat way of looking at it there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He then goes on to talk about power, which was also another interesting bit of, I guess what he's saying is sort of the Western principles here.
Oh, yeah.
He says that power is the fundamental impulse in European history. He says that power then gets into our religious traditions, and this is why Christians couldn't live with another organized religion. That's why there was the prosecution of pagans, is because the Christians wanted the power.
Yeah, I don't know if the other societies are any different.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Western philosophy or Western mythology is that much different with regard to power? I mean, do you see that?
I don't think so.
I didn't see that either.
I don't know.
And many other religions have subjugated neighboring or religions in the same area. And quite frankly, isn't it most common that if you conquered an area and you had your gods, then were the stronger gods, so you destroy their temples? Every society that I can think of that has conquered another society has replaced their temples. I mean, the what is that? Hagia Sophia? That was a great Christian church, and now it's a Muslim.
Yes.
What they don't call them temples. What do they
Mosque.
call them? Mosque.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that just the same? I don't see how. I think he appreciates and knows a lot about Western philosophy, but he just can't bring himself to love it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
He needs a lesson in love, or he needed a lesson in love.
He is dead, unfortunately.
Of Western thought.
Yeah,
because he's a product of it. It seems like he wants it to be. I don't know.
Because I feel like
critical of it.
The desire for religions to persecute those around them isn't so much power. It's that religion knows to themselves that it is right, and you have to convince the other people that you have to join the right side. And I think that's fundamental of every religion, every organized religion, at least. I don't think it's that just one wants more power.
I think it's all power.
You think it's all power?
I think he's right about it being power. I'm disputing that it's unique to Western thought.
Okay.
I think it's just universal.
I guess so.
I mean, is there a religion that didn't murder some other competing adherents back in the day when
None
they first
that I
started?
can think of.
I can't think of either.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know about Buddhism, but I assume they killed people too.
Oh, probably. Well, I don't know.
I mean, they just go around going,
Oh, we've lost the Buddhist. Oh. You've offended him. We're losing
I
our
think I
numbers
complimented the Buddhist.
Maybe.
Because they didn't murder anybody. They just went,
We've lost everybody but the Buddhist.
Okay.
We now only have Buddhist listeners.
I do appreciate, though, maybe this is not the right segue, but he is a strong believer in a one man, one woman relationship. I wonder what you think about same sex stuff. If he had any different.
Yeah, I don't know, because it's not mentioned in here.
That was not that big of a public debate back in the 80s.
Yeah,
back then it was not even whispered about among the gay activists.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you do have that thing popping up in mythology from time to time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So you'd think that he would have something to say about that, but apparently not.
Yeah. It really wasn't that big of a topic of discussion back then.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't. The topic was, hey, leave me alone. Let me mind your own business, and I'll not flaunt it all in front of you. I just want to go to work, type of stuff. And it wasn't until after they got those equal protection rights that it kind of went into the gay marriage, and then it's whatever it is now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
He then goes on to talk about the 3 ages of the spirit, and I really like this here.
Where are you at? What page?
I'm on page 248.
Oh, okay.
He says, around the end of the 12th century, the abbot Joachim of Florus wrote of the 3 ages of the spirit. After the fall...
BS.
You thought this was BS?
Yeah,
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
After the fall in the garden, he said, God had to compensate for the disaster and reintroduce the spiritual principle into history. He chose a race to become the vehicle of this communication, and that is the age of the Father and of Israel. Then this race, having been prepared as a priestly race, competent to become the vessel of the incarnation, produces the Son. Thus the second age is of the Son and the Church, when not a single race, but the whole of humanity, is to receive the message of the spiritual will of God. The third age, which this philosopher in around 1260 said was now about to begin, is the age of the Holy Spirit, who speaks directly to the individual. Anyone who incarnates or brings into his life the message of the word is equivalent to Jesus. That's the sense of this third age. Just as Israel has been rendered archaic by the institution of the church, so the church is rendered archaic by the individual experience. You seemed very bored while I was reading that. But I kind of like this thought. Not so much that the church is rendered archaic necessarily, but that we have seen throughout the Bible and through Catholicism, the emphasis is placed on different people, because all of the Old Testament is placed on one chosen people, essentially. This is the Israelites, the 12 tribes of Israel, their descendants. But then when you get into the New Testament, Jesus says this is for everybody, essentially. So I think there is some truth to that. And in that, he kind of applies that then, to the arranged marriage and that sort of thing. And that, that was the second age, but then the third age really places that love and that, sort of spirit into the individual as well. You are making strange faces at me.
It's all right.
It's all right.
It's all right. I just didn't think it was.
You didn't like his. You didn't like.
I think it was worthy of discussion.
You didn't like the Abbot Joachim Flores?
3 ages. You just like to say ages, like like we're in Middle Earth.
Oh my God!
End of the third age. Gandalf is for the fourth age of the fifth elves and the Lord of the Rings and such, so forth.
Are you done?
Well, I did get my Tolkien reference in.
You did. Thank you for that.
And it was appropriate.
It was appropriate. There you go. Moving on, he talks about marriage and love affairs, kind of the difference between those and why one lasts and one doesn't. He says, marriage is a commitment to that which you are, your other half. Yeah. It is a life commitment. It is the prime concern of your life. However, love affairs are just relationships for pleasure. As soon as the pleasure is gone, they become, unpleasurable, and they eventually just dissolve.
Yeah.
He says, marriage is an ongoing sacrament. Every day you love, and every day you forgive. So I think, that's a good distinction to make between the two. If you're looking at a relationship, are you just there for the pleasure? Are you just there for the good times and that sort of thing? Or are you there to love and to forgive, to sort of devote yourself to the other half?
Right. And this, I have this underlying, he goes on, he talks about loyalty, which is my big thing, which means not cheating, not defecting, not leaving when times are tough. I've already talked about that. But I have this quote on the next page where he says, I'm not, where you're talking about like a relationship about, you got to sacrifice, for her, for the marriage. And he says, I'm not sacrificing to her, I'm sacrificing to the relationship. And resentment against the other one is wrongly placed. And boy, that's so true, because there's always compromise, especially when you have kids, where you have to give up time. I mean, for sure time, because, you have to make a prioritization of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And, especially when you're younger and you're first starting a family, and maybe your buddies are going out drinking or going to the football game or something. Sometimes you just can't do it because maybe she's going to do something, or maybe you're going to do something together. And it's important for a successful marriage to understand you're not sacrificing to her, you're sacrificing for the relationship. And that's a hard lesson to really accept, I think, because you do get resentful. I've gotten resentful. Like, son of a gun. Yeah. And I have to watch these kids again. I mean, I love the kids and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes you want to do your own thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what he says here. A little bit in a way. He says that marriage does not immunize one from looking to other relationships, but one cannot have a love affair and a marriage at the same time. And I think we could apply that even more broadly. Love affair meaning anything that doesn't really prioritize your marriage or your relationship there. If you're looking for other ways to spend your time, then that marriage is not going to last, and that also that side affair also won't last either. It's not gonna work out at all.
Well, I think I talked to you. Maybe I told you this or not. I don't know. But there was a prominent lawyer who had. It was found out that he had a kid with another woman. And he had moved in with the other woman, and it was a common friend of mine and a couple other guys that had been married for some years, and we have kids and stuff. And I remember one guy saying, he's just completely befuddled by the whole thing. I mean, we were all surprised by it. We shouldn't have been, but we were. Yeah. And he says, I just don't understand. I'm like, yeah. And he says, no, I mean, how does he get the time? I can't. I have a hard time remembering one birthday. How do you remember two? You get your wives, and you got and that's kind of what Mr. Campbell is saying is that if you're sacrificing, I think Moyers maybe more so than Campbell in the conversation, that if you have some other affair, you're sacrificing your marriage to that. You don't have the time and the ability to do both, so you're really not acting appropriately in your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like all sorts of different arrangements now. I mean, none of that stuff's going to work out. There are going to be people so screwed up 10 years from now. They're going to be like, "What did I do?" Yeah, but it'll be too late because you ruined it all. Yeah, you ruined yourself. You ruined yourself. You ruined them. You ruined your kids. And for what? For nothing.
Yeah, there's this joke I saw. I think it was a tweet reposted on Instagram, something like that. But it's like, in every open relationship, there's one person who proposed the idea and the other person who cries themselves to sleep every night. And it's like, it's just things like that just
Yeah.
will not work out. You have to prioritize just one thing there.
There's nothing but sorrow at the
Yeah.
end of that. It's the rainbow of sorrow. There is a pot of gold filled with sorrow. And everyone that goes across that rainbow ends up in the pot of sorrow. And it's just, there's no escaping it. It's like a black hole of misery.
Yeah.
And they've chosen a path. And once you step on the path, it's like a slide. You know, it's like a greased metal playground slide in 110 degree weather. It's going to burn all the way down, and it's not going to be fun. But there's no way to get back up that slide. You're just going down the slide. You ended up in the gravel. It's awful.
That is a lovely, cynical expression there. Just what I expect.
But I don't know why. That's why I think he kind of goes off into general philosophy about what's good about love and marriage, and he does reference, mythology and stuff. But it just seems to be more of a discussion.
It is much more,
and it's a great discussion. I think he does a great job of explaining it, and I agree with like 99% of what he's saying.
He makes an interesting point thereafter. He says, "Love violates morality." He says it expresses itself outside of the socially approved manners of life. He says that it's a higher spiritual experience than the social order. So it's interesting that he uses the word morality rather than, something like, society's expectations or things like that. Because I think that is true in a way. I mean, I don't know. It's just an interesting thought there that love violates morality itself. It must be higher than anything else.
Well, I think he looks at morality like a religious. I don't know. I thought there was kind of a weird turn of phrase that he says it violates morality. I don't know that I agree with that sentiment, but
I feel like I would agree with it if it was put into different words. Like I feel like there's a lot of truth right there, but I just don't know how to rephrase that in a way that makes sense to me.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thought. Then he moves on. This is what you were talking about earlier here at the end, suffering.
Yes.
He says that love involves suffering. The pain of love is the pain of life. He says love bears all things, endures all things. And love is so intense that we sometimes have to be taught and helped to let go of what we love. And then he has this interesting sort of back and forth with Moyers here at the very end. I'm going to read from page 257. It says, love is the burning point of life, and since all life is sorrowful, so is love. The stronger the love, the more the pain. Moyers says, but love bears all things. Campbell responds, love itself is a pain, you might say, the pain of being truly alive. And I just think that's a beautiful phrase for one thing, but also, it directly relates to what we were just talking about, the truth that you were saying earlier, and that in order to truly love, there has to be that pain. You have to give up stuff. You have to have that pain along with your husband or your wife, and you have to move through it and move for it.
Yes, and I quoted from part of this passage. I was reading this book on the way to our dance lesson, class, or whatever. Yes. And usually I drive, but your mother was driving so I could read this thing before the podcast. And I mentioned to her that, and she was aggravated with me. I don't know if it's because I was making her drive or what, but I did mention, and I think she approved silently that that love is pain, and I think I got a little nod and not a happy smirk, more like pain. Like she was going to deliver pain to me or something. I don't know. I felt very loved.
That sounds about right. That sounds spot on.
Felt very loved by Mr. Campbell's definition that love is pain. I felt the love.
You felt the love. That's
a deep, abiding love. He has a real way of talking about it, really stressing how much of a sacrifice and how painful it is, which you don't often hear.
Yeah. Because so much of the conversation nowadays is that, everything is really centered around pleasure, which is very much absolutely opposed to what he is saying here. Right. And that, the modern discussion is do what makes you happy, do what makes you feel good. Love is what love is. Love is what makes you happy. And it's like, it's really not.
It can be.
It can be. There's definitely a lot of happiness within love.
Yes.
But it's not. That is not what love is.
Yes, correct. That's not the core. It's not the disease. It's a symptom. The happiness can be a symptom, but your symptoms come and go.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So,
Look at love like a disease.
a disease.
Yes.
It is it's like an infection.
Uh-huh.
It's an infection, but it's an infection you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then once you get it, then you have different symptoms. They come and go.
Interesting.
Kind of like COVID, the super bug.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a headache. Maybe you feel happiness.
This is weird. This is very weird. But yeah, I really agree. Like you were saying, with 99% of what he says, really emphasizing that love is just not there, for happiness. It's so much more than that. It goes
Correct.
above that.
And marriage and love is a series of compromises and sacrifices, and it is you willingly sacrifice other things for that love and that relationship.
Yeah, I would almost say. That Campbell kind of says here, love is almost the meaning of life.
Yeah.
I think he would not disagree with that.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Do you think that love is what we should be searching for?
All you need is love.
All you need is love.
Love is what
yes.
you need.
I was actually just listening to the Beatles compilation album, Love Songs, with all of most of their love songs on there. So it was very thematic.
Yeah, it's just another silly love song.
Okay.
That's a different song.
Yes, but do you agree with that love is sort of the meaning of life?
The meaning of life. I can't tell you what I think I don't know what the meaning of life is. I don't know what the question, what is the meaning of life, means. What do you mean? What's the purpose of all of it?
Is that what we should be?
Or is the purpose of my life, or the purpose of all of our lives, or the purpose of the entire creation? I don't know. I don't know.
Do you at least think it is one of the most important things in our lives?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's different than the purpose.
Than the purpose, yeah.
Importance is not purpose.
Interesting.
Goal is not a purpose.
Goals, yeah.
Is it my purpose, or is it God's purpose? I mean, I don't know what the God's purpose is.
Yeah.
It could just be entertainment.
Could. It's a little bleak.
Well, no, maybe not.
Really?
Why would that be bleak?
They were here just to entertain God.
That was. What if that was the purpose? But that's just His purpose. Why is that bleak?
Because I feel like we were made for something more than entertainment.
Why?
Because I don't know. I don't like it. That's why.
I don't know.
Because. If you're going to make something that is capable of the things that we are capable with, I think you'd want more out of it than just entertainment. I'm not talking about you. I know you would put people here just for entertainment.
I mean, why wouldn't God just do that?
It's a lot of work for, I think, very little return.
Wasn't that hard for God? He created everything. Snap of the fingers, boom.
But I think if you make something that is capable of having relationships, you would want a relationship with that thing.
Yeah,
I think that's why God made us, is to have a relationship with us.
Yeah.
And it's not just to look at us and say, oh, Mark and Adam are doing their podcast again. I guess I'll tune in tonight. Do you think God listened to this podcast? Do you think he's one of our 30 weekly downloads? It's from God himself.
The question is, did God know what we were going to say in our podcast?
Oh, we're bringing this one back.
Before the podcast. And could we have done anything different?
Oh, well, of course he knew.
Yeah. Was I determined to have?
You were not determined
to
do so.
My rant at the beginning of the podcast.
No.
But he already knew I was going to do
I knew you were going to make that rant. Did I make you make that rant?
That's more of a prediction.
That is, I guess so.
I could have. Well, maybe I couldn't have.
Yeah.
Helped myself.
Yes. Well, this is very near the last episode of this season. We only have one more chapter left in the book, so we need to start thinking about the Masks of Eternity, which I'm not entirely sure what it'll be about, but I'm sure it'll be interesting. So we need to start thinking about what book we need to read next.
You know what I know what that's about.
Do you?
Yeah, it's about all those COVID protocols out of the CDC. Masks of Eternity. They never go away.
Yes, but like I was saying, we do need to start thinking of a book to read for next season. So if you have any suggestions, you can, of course, tweet at us at ULMTD. That's really not helpful. ULMTD opinions on Twitter. Let us know if you have any suggestions for what we should read next time. like I said, we will not be doing a shirt for season 3, but we'll do a combined one for season 3 and 4.
Maybe we'll do a cap.
Maybe we'll do a cap.
Yeah.
We'll do something. We'll do something for all of our thousands and thousands and thousands of fans. A flute?
Yeah,
A little pan flute?
That's a little much.
That's where the line is.
Yeah, I was thinking whistle or flute. Pan flute, too many tubes. Too many tubes.
Oh my god. Okay. What was I even saying? I don't even know what I was talking about.
I think we were signing off.
Yes, we are signing off. Let us know what you think we should do for next season. We're open to any suggestions. So be sure to tweet at us there. Do you have any final thoughts?
No.
No? You say that every time. This has been Season 3, Episode 8 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
I hope most people skipped the first 11 minutes.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
You don't. That was...
No, it was a good rant. It was a good rant. It was a good rant.
I worry about our country.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll pull through. That's a little bleak way to end the episode there, I guess.
I thought we were done already.
Oh.